Thank you for watching our presentation. My name is Masahiro Yoshimura from Setsunan University.
I'm Tomohito Hiromori from Meiji University.
I'm Ryo Kirimura from Ritsumei Gan University.
And Makoto Mitsugi from Otoyo University of Commerce.
Today, we will talk about how does an assigned reader affect group dynamics in the Japanese EFL classroom. First, I'll talk about our research background and research questions in introduction section. Recently, one of the core research themes of group dynamics is leadership. If a leader is in a group and takes a leadership role in the group activity, they can pull the group and increase other members' motivation, which leads to boost the group's performance. However, it is less likely that a leader will emerge spontaneously, so we adapted the assigned reader method in this study. One student in each group was selected as a leader, and we investigated the impact of their presence or absence on group members' L2 motivation and their group work dynamics. To clarify the mechanism of group work dynamics and motivation changes, we use complex dynamic systems theory, which is called CDST in this study. As a literature review using CDST, Popo investigate the relationship between group work dynamics and learners' engagement in L2 tasks from the CDST perspective. And he also creates group work dynamic measuring instrument. Hiromori et al. Focused on assigned leadership and demonstrate whether there is a difference in actual group work engagement and motivation between groups with a leader and ones without them from the CDST perspective. This study showed that assigned readers can contribute to a smooth start of interaction among members and a constantly high level of motivation until the end of the task. It also suggested that it may take time for members of the groups to stick together and collaborate without a leader. However, Hiromori et al. Excluded non-verbal aspects because of the difficulty to videotape all the groups. In Popo's studies, non-verbal communication accounted for 59% of GWD-related behaviors. Therefore, we need to do the follow-up study for Hiromori et al. And investigate whether there is a difference in a group work engagement and motivation between groups with or without a leader, including both verbal and non-verbal aspects. We have two research questions. Number one, how did L2 learners' motivation change toward group work depending on the presence of leader role students? Number two, what differences were found in GWD scores, both verbal and non-verbal, with and without the assigned reader?
Okay, let's move on to the method section. The participants are 78 university students who learn English as a foreign language in Japan. And their English proficiency level is from CFR A2 level to B1 level. I'll explain the details later, but we implemented a group work activity with 3 people per group. We set 2 different groups, such as an experimental group and a control group. All the learner groups in the experimental group have assigned leaders, and they were chosen before the task based on the level of English learning motivation, English proficiency, and the level of preference on pair work. So experimental group has 14 assigned leader groups. Also, there are 12 learner groups as a control group, which doesn't have leaders. And this control group carried out the task without any specific instructions. Both groups were engaged in a group work task to describe the pictures in English writing, collaborating with group members. The given time was 20 minutes, and students used Microsoft Teams or Zoom as an online platform. They were not allowed to use a dictionary and Japanese in the activity. Also, there was no teacher intervention during group work. In this study, 3 types of data were collected. The first one is a motive graph, which is students' plot of motivation every 5 minutes during the task. Then the second one is a post-questionnaire survey conducted to evaluate the students' attitude toward group tasks. It contains questions about task motivation and the group collaboration. And we were allowed to video record the group work, and we later transcribed the recorded data and counted the number of occurrences of nonverbal elements as we watched the video. As data analysis, we conducted independent sample t-tests and correlation analysis to compare the experimental and control group concerning motivation levels and attitudes toward group work. The transcribed data was calculated based on Pooper's group work dynamic measuring instrument, and we revised it by removing some items to make it fit for a task to be done online. Also, we calculated the characteristic behaviors based on the list of GWD measuring instruments. And this list is divided into 4 categories, positive and negative, and each includes verbal and nonverbal section. Okay, this is the list, and which is divided into 4 categories. And as I said, behaviors not arising from online activities are excluded in advance. Okay, after all tasks were transcribed, GWD scores were calculated based on the measuring instrument. The calculation was done by checking all the remarks and counting every one of them included in the GWD list. Then all the counted items were entered into spreadsheets like this and do the necessary calculations for each item. Because different behaviors have different degrees and frequencies of impact on group work, numerical weights were assigned to each characteristic, which was originally done by Pooper, who created the instrument.
Okay, so in my part, I will briefly talk about the results of the current study. So first, we conducted t-tests to compare motivation levels at different time points and the attitudes toward group work. That is task motivation and group motivation in the experimental group EG and control group CG. As the table shows, there were no significant differences between the participants in the 2 groups in their motivation levels at each time point and their task attitudes. Where both groups demonstrated an increase in motivation over time, there was a tendency for motivational gains to slow down or stay at around 15 minutes. Second, we investigated the correlations for the motivation levels at each time point. Overall, stronger correlations were obtained between adjacent elements, for example, 0 minute and 5 minutes, whereas weaker correlations were found between elements located at a distance, for example, 0 minute and 20 minutes. However, there was a difference in the tendency between the 2 groups. Motivation at the start of the group work in the CG lessened the impact on subsequent motivation, but the EG relatively maintained its influence even at the end of the activity. From the CDSD perspective, it can be said that system's initial conditions, that is, initial motivation state in the EEG were relatively maintained from start to finish. In other words, the dynamics within the group remained constant throughout the activity. This may be due to the addition of a leader role student to the EEG To examine this in more detail, we next compare the details of the GWD scores in both groups. Okay, here are the average GWD scores for positive characteristics on both verbal and non-verbal aspects. In both verbal and non-verbal aspects, the GWD scores in EG tended to be higher than those in CG. This may indicate that the group work was more active by appointing a student as the leader in each group. More specifically, while behaviors such as contributing ideas, as in P5, were more common in both groups, characteristics such as leadership roles, P1, making positive comments, P2, and asking ideas from other members, P6, were more common in the experimental group. As a result, a large number of mild laughter, P3, in the non-verbal aspect observed in the EG. On the other hand, as you can see in the next slide, in relation to negative characteristics, all groups exhibited very few, if any, negative behaviors. This may be because the participants in this study generally considerate of other members in their class did not use too much negative GWD, which includes ignoring, criticizing, and refusing. The only two characteristics that stood out were verbal N4, saying something about being ignored, and nonverbal N6, posing. However, it is more likely that these were silence and the posing caused by the participants' insufficient English ability rather than negative behavior toward group activities. So now we will move on to the discussion part.
Okay, discussion section. Our first research question is about time series changes in motivation with or without assigned leaders. The results are basically consistent with those of our previous study. So there were no significant differences between EZ and CZ in their motivation levels at each time point. But only in EZ, initial motivation level significantly affects the subsequent motivation levels even through the end of the task. As we suppose, and we suppose that's the effect of the effort of the assigned leaders. Then our second research question is about the difference in GWD scores. Interestingly, the average GWD score in EZ was about 50% higher than CZ. So we can say the groups with leaders were more active in group work. Specifically, in items such as positive remarks, asking for others' ideas, mild laughter, and listener feedback were observed more often in EZ. We can conclude assigned leaders served as a stimulus to the activation of group work. On the negative, nonverbal side, we found that posing was remarkably high in both EG and CZ. We also look at the results in terms of verbal and nonverbal aspects. In Popper's study, nonverbal communication accounted for 59% of all GW-related behaviors. However, in our study, only 38% was nonverbal. We discussed the causes of the gap. First of all, the task in our study was done online, so nonverbal communication could be intrinsically difficult in a remote setting. We also think Japanese students are just not good at communicating nonverbally compared with people from other cultures. And there should be other interesting factors that are responsible for less nonverbal characteristics in our study. Let me wrap up with pedagogical implications and ideas for further study. First, assigning leaders is a good way to stimulate group work dynamics throughout the period, but we suppose it's important to instruct the leaders beforehand to be engaged in certain leadership behaviors. Second, posing appears as a negative sign in group work dynamics. causes of frequent pausing is an interesting topic of our further study, but we can say pausing or silence is an attractive state from the perspective of CDSD. And how the reader can deal with silence in group work should be a challenging issue to discuss further. Finally, through this study, we got more interested in nonverbal communication in group work dynamics. As I mentioned, nonverbal communication seems to be difficult in a remote setting. But on the other hand, online teaching is now on the rise. So considering the importance of nonverbal aspects in L2 group work, how we can incorporate it in our real and the virtual classrooms is an interesting topic to explore. Okay, here are the list of references. Thank you very much for watching our presentation.
Hi, and welcome to the presentation on the paper using eye tracking to examine reading only and reading while listening and a second language at different language proficiencies. I'm the presenter here today. My name is Elisa Wan. This paper is collaboratively written by me and my colleagues, Jenna Lei, Arrow Fu, John Fong, and our supervisor and corresponding author, Dr. Matthew Wallace. So a brief introduction about how we come up with this topic in the first place. Eye tracking has been a hot topic in recent years to study reading and cognition because of its unobtrusive nature to gauge people's attention, especially in complex situations. That's why we think RL, reading while listening, is a perfect scenario to be studied in eye tracking technology. RL is basically combining verbal input and auditory input together. It is repeatedly supported by some empirical longitudinal studies that it can facilitate second language readers' reading comprehension. Therefore, it is considered one of the standard practices to enhance reading development for teachers in classrooms. However, some eye tracking studies recently suggest that this facilitation effect may not be entirely true, and I explain it in my literature review. There are two categories of RL studies. The first is previous longitudinal ones, and the second is recent cross-sectional ones that uses eye tracking technology. So the previous longitudinal ones, they used long-term RL trainings on the subjects before experimenting on them. What they did is that they give the subjects regular exercises of using reading while listening as tools to assist themselves in reading comprehension over a time span of 8 months or half year, etc. And the subject groups that they focus on are elementary level L2 readers. While the recent cross-sectional ones, they did not have such long-term RL treatments. In the subject groups, they focus on R2 groups, L1 readers, and advanced L2 readers. That makes them cross-sectional studies. The dependent variables are also different. The previous ones only look at comprehension accuracy, while the recent cross-sectional ones also look at cognitive efforts from the eye movement statistics. The conclusion that they come out are also different. So the previous longitudinal ones, all of the numerous studies on RL support the conclusion that RL increases comprehension accuracy in their experiment scenario. However, in recent cross-sectional studies, they did not find any significant difference in comprehension accuracy between RO and RL for both groups of readers. And surprisingly, on the cognitive level, they even found that Concurrent found that RL hinders L1 readers' cognitive processing. So what he found is L1 readers had shorter and fewer fixations in RO compared to RL. Fixations are defined as the maintaining of the visual gaze on a single location in eye tracking, and it basically represents attention and cognitive efforts. So shorter and fewer fixations means less cognitive efforts and higher reading fluency. And for advanced L2 readers, there is no significant difference in eye movements. The findings of the two categories of studies might seem divergent and inconsistent. However, we think that it can all boil down to the same theoretical basis and be explained by the differences of their subject groups. That is the basic cognitive process of reading, which contains first the word recognition stage, which includes phonological coding and semantic coding, then parsing, and then higher level comprehension. So for elementary level L2 readers, the cognitive load for decoding in the word recognition stage is much heavier for them. This is because the weaker L2 readers are less familiar with the pronunciation of words, and the slowdown or failure in their phonological coding process might deteriorate the whole word recognition. Therefore, providing the audio input in RL for them can give them phonological information, which can maximize their retrieval accuracy of known words, thus increasing their comprehension performance. Now, so that is why, so that explains the longitudinal previous studies. And for L1 readers, however, they have automized lower level processing. So when audio input is played alongside the reading text, they got distracted and slowed down in the word recognition stage because they have to align reading with the audio. And also, during this duration gap, due to the difference between the reading speed and the audio speed, they may also be proceeding with another higher level comprehension here, that is to incorporating what they have already comprehended earlier into their mental model. And such extra cognitive activity definitely requires more cognitive efforts, and that in turn shows a hindering effect of RL for them. Now, for advanced L2 readers, we think they're in between, so they can process the text more quickly and easily than the elementary L2 readers, of course. But the process may not be as automized as L1 readers during silent reading, so that they neither receive assistance from the phonological information of RL, nor have the ability to process higher level cognitive activity like L1 readers. So the RL shows no difference, shows no effect on them in the end. So this seems like a very nice mechanism. However, it is unsupported by discussing the empirical literature, because the two categories of studies are too different in their experiment scenarios and subject groups. The previous ones, they used long-term trainings, while the recent ones did not, and the previous ones look at elementary L2 readers, while the recent ones look at a total different subject groups. And that is why we had our current study. Because there has been no eye movement data supporting RL's facilitation effect for elementary level L2 readers on a cognition level, we decided to extend upon concurrent study by recruiting intermediate and elementary level L2 readers as our participant groups and investigate their comprehension accuracy and eye movements in the contexts of RL and RO. Based on the theoretical mechanisms that we just discussed, we still believe that we hypothesized that there will be a facilitation effect for both intermediate and lower level readers in our study. And we even hypothesized that the degree of its facilitation for the two groups might be different. There might be more facilitation for the elementary level L2 readers than the intermediate level readers. Now, this is based on this hypothesis spectrum model that we are prompted to propose that basically concludes the differing effect of RL on readers across language proficiency levels or vocabulary levels here when we discussed in terms of their cognitive efforts and reading fluency. So it ranges from a hindrance effect on L1 readers to a zero effect for L2 advanced readers, with an increasing facilitation effect as the vocabulary level of the L2 readers decrease. So you can see that as the vocabulary level decreased, the facilitation effect of reading cognition increases. This is based on the theoretical basis of reading process that we just discussed. And in our study, we asked two questions. Are there differences between the elementary and intermediate L2 readers' comprehension. Other eye movements also different. We recruited 22 Chinese ASL adults in the University of Macau, and the materials we used are first Mira's XLEX vocabulary size test before the experiment, so that we can group the participants into two groups. We used two short story passages as the reading text for comprehension accuracy and eye movements. The story passages are controlled for their keyword word percentage to make sure that they are at the comfortable reading level for the two groups of readers. The listening materials were recorded by a female native English speaker of North American variety, and the speech rate was adjusted to 3.3 words per second, which was supported by Concurrent that it is an appropriate speed for this level of readers. Now, the reasons why test score is used to divide participants into two groups instead of treating it as a continuous variable is because of the small sample size, and that is a limitation of our study that we omit. The participants completed both RO and RL tasks while their eye movements were recorded. They finished one text for each reading mode, and the order of presenting the text with or without auditory input was randomized and counterbalanced. Each text was divided into 5 slides, and each slide was followed by another slide of multiple choice comprehension question right after the display of the text slide to ensure the short-term memory would not affect the comprehension performance of participants. We recorded 6 eye movement measures and calculated their means and standard deviations over all AOIs in the text. You can see the definitions of them here, but to simply put, shorter time to first fixation with longer first fixation durations means more cognitive efforts, more attention, and therefore lower reading fluency. Shorter total fixation durations and visit durations means less cognitive efforts and higher reading fluency, and fixation or visit counts assess how many times the participants refocus on the AOIs, causing repeated fixations or visited. So lower fixation or visit counts represent less of cognitive efforts and therefore higher reading fluency. Results. So in terms of comprehension accuracy, Table 1 shows the descriptives, and what we did is a 2x2 mixed ANOVA analysis because they are two groups of participants in two reading modes. The DV is comprehension accuracy, obviously, and what we found is there is no significant main effect of reading mode. This meets our hypothesis and also aligns with Conklin and Palliser's recent cross-sectional studies that there is no significant difference in comprehension accuracy for both groups of people. But we extend this conclusion to intermediate and elementary level readers. In terms of eye movements, there are 6 DVs, so we did 6 ANOVA analysis. This is the descriptives, and this is the ANOVA analysis results. So for the main effects, the reading mode has had a main effect on all measures except first fixation duration, and the participant level has a main effect on all measures except time to first fixation and visit count. Now for interactions, there is an interaction between the reading mode and the participant level in total fixation and visit duration. Now let's discuss the implications in comprehension performance. There's no significant difference for intermediate and elementary level readers between RL and RO conditions, which supports our first hypothesis and aligns with the recent cross-sectional studies, in contrast with previous longitudinal ones that suggest facilitation effect of RL. And this implicates that RL trainings are may be required to show facilitation effect of RL on comprehension performances of students. This could be very insightful for future teachers if they want to apply RL for reading development of students. They might need long-term training. On the cognitive level, the main effect of reading mode shows that regardless of language level, participants in the RL had fewer and shorter fixations than in the RO. This supports our second hypothesis that RL has a facilitation effect on both subject groups, and the interactions and total fixation and visit durations shows that elementary level L2 readers receive more facilitation from RL than intermediate readers to some degree. And these two findings supports the proposed spectrum model for audio supports effects on reading cognition. And it is the first model that summarizes the effect of RL on reading cognition across a range of language levels and provides a comprehensive view of how RL affects reading. The model may be of use to classroom practitioners who are interested in helping their learners improve their decoding skills and increase their reading speed. Thank you.
Namaste. I'm Vidya Pokhrel from Nepal. Today I'm going to present my paper in this AsiaTEFL conference. So let me share my paper here. I hope it is coming. Okay. Yep, so it's coming. All right, so now my screen is shared here. Okay, so I'm going to start now, and I'm going to present my paper here in the topic autoethnography, a method comprising multidimensional traits in ELT research trends. I'm PhD scholar in Kathmandu University in Nepal. Before I move to the next slide here. Now, in the second slide. All right. Okay, so these are my presentation highlights. So in the beginning, I'm going to talk about autoethnography, and then I will talk about autoethnography and English language education, what is the relationship between them. And then I will move towards the analysis of trends and dimensions in ELT research using autoethnography. And finally, I'll move to the conclusion. Now here, when we say autoethnography, it is Hayano 1979 who is often taken as the first person to use autoethnography. But Hayder 1975 is the one who used the term autoethnography. And this is what Cheik and this is 2011 claimed. And this autoethnography actually came into existence when the ethnographers they started taking account of their own observation when they thought that observing oneself is more important than observing others. I mean, observing others is also important, but it is more important to know ourselves first. So it came into existence in that way, and it's not simply a description of lived experiences. Rather, it is also a process that creates multiple layers of learning. Kutashi 2015 also claimed this. Now, talking about autoethnography and ELT research, there is actually the big value of autoethnography in ELT research, because in ELT research, autoethnography is a rising method. This is what Kanagradza 2012 claimed. So This autoethnography and ELT research are connected to one another because it consists of personal stuff, which is about language teachers' self-identity. It also consists of other social entities which are associated with their experiences, and also it is about their professional growth. So this is all the combination of personal, social, and professional behavior. These two things, autoethnography and ELT, are closely related, because personal, social, and professional things, or say personal, social, and professional experiences can be brought in autoethnographic study. And here in this research, I'll talk about autoethnography. I mean, in this presentation, I'll talk about the research where I have tried to show the connection between autoethnography and ELT research, and there I'm focusing more on the trends and the coverage of ELT dimensions. So here I have analyzed some of the research studies, and I found that autoethnography has been used in ELT research, and then autoethnography has been mostly used as a tool for identity construction, for professional development, for pedagogical practices, for transformative learning, as a tool for corrective movement, and as a tool for vulnerability. So on English teachers' identity construction, Gee 2000 claimed that identity is an important tool for researchers to understand the self and society. And also, Ijadinia 2015 stated that teachers, they construct their identity with their interaction with significant others. So in case of teachers, their significant others might be students, or parents, or the school administration. So these things are associated there, and these help in their identity construction. So from my study, RAN 2012 is towards in this identity construction, where he examined on identity as English teacher and learner. Lepidus et al. 2013 highlighted the personetics of ESL teachers, which is also about self-identity. Yazin 2018 brought his experiences of designing the identity-oriented courses for English teachers. Junika 2019 narrated his experiences of bilingual identity. Similarly, teacher identity has been brought there, and also the non-native identity has been brought by Huo 2017, Yezen 2019, Suri 2014, Say 2016, Hopkins 2015, and Lay 2015, where they have talked about non-native teacher identity complex, about new and old selves of the international students' identity, and also about real and imagined self, and also about identity of inferiority. So on the professional development of English teachers too, this autoethnography plays an important role, because teachers, they can disclose their professional experiences through autoethnography. They collect their narratives, and they can assist these things, and they can view their own professional growth. So from my study, Kanegraza 2012, Park 2016, Mavwan 2018, Gautam 2018, Dias and Rana 2019, they have all brought their experiences related to professional development. Kanegraza brought his journey of developing himself as the TESOL professional. Park 2016 sees lack of community practices among TESOL practitioners. Mavwan talks about MOOC and its connection with professional development of English teachers. And Gautam talks about his experience of becoming the professional English language teacher. And Dias and Rana talks about pre-service teaching as a way to grow professionally. So autoethnography is also important to bring the pedagogical, to bring the experiences related to pedagogical practices. So when we talk about pedagogical practices, this helps English teachers to build their pedagogical practices and dispositions. And autoethnography helps view pedagogy as a means to put teaching learning theories into practice. And for this, teachers they need a kind of social setting, which is actually the classroom. And so autoethnography is helpful to bring this type of pedagogical dispositions. And from my study, Gagnon 2011 brought the experiences of using autoethnography to improve ESL teachers' writing. Vasconcelos 2011, Eriken 2015, Troha 2013, Kashaka 2014, they have all brought the experiences of their pedagogical practices, where they talked about teacher-students relationship, theory and practice gap in the classroom, and then the ground level observation of English classroom, and changing attitudes towards teaching, and then about the misconceptions upon linguistic proficiency and pedagogical skills. And autoethnography has been used as the lens to view the practices of the past and the present, which helps the researchers to envision the future possibilities. So in my study, Pante 2018 talked about culturally relevant pedagogy as a pathway for transformative learning. Kamenjian, Lemberger, Holland, they have all talked about transformative learning through autoethnography in their classroom. Now, on the corrective movement of English teachers, autoethnography has been used as the corrective movement. And, this autoethnography actually came after ethnographic practices. And ethnographic practices have been found as the one with colonized nature, because they erased the subjectivity of the researchers. And because of that, autoethnography came as the corrective movement. And from my study, Yezen, Kanagraza, and Jane, they have talked about autoethnography as the corrective movement, because this is where researchers can situate themselves. Mirosheni also found that autoethnography is a corrective movement because it consists of self and society, which brings lifelike findings in the research. And Stanley 2019 also talks about autoethnography in ELT, and here Stanley brings the concept of the autoethnography being misinterpreted as memoir or life writing, and this needs to stand as a corrective movement for fair research. And on the vulnerable self of English teachers, autoethnography is also a kind of writing where researchers can uncover their own face. They can bring their vulnerable self, and then it can be taught, giving space to the vulnerability in writing. So in my study, Kanagraza 2012 brings the vulnerability, and he actually expresses that he was fumbled to give answer to the foreign trainer when he was asked about the method of teaching in ELT classroom. Liu 2017 also talks about being on the peripheral trajectory as an English teacher. And Eric in 2015 brings the experience of being compelled to leave his smoking habit when a little girl came to him and asked about his different habits, and then when she says that he smelt like her father, he then was compelled to leave his smoking habit. So this type of expressions, this kind of vulnerability can be brought in the autoethnographic writing. Now, focusing on my research, the majority of my research are towards identity construction. Though I collected the journal articles related to autoethnography using ELT research using autoethnography, and then there I found that 11 of my studies are towards identity construction, and 5 of my studies are towards teacher professional development, 5 are towards pedagogical practices, 4 are towards transformative learning, 3 are towards corrective movement, and 2 are towards vulnerable self. So also, I have separated here the dimensions of the study under those research trends, and I have divided the number of studies there comprising those dimensions. So it might take much time to explain this here. So I'm going to move ahead talking about the conclusion. And now, autoethnography is a well-practiced genre in ELT research. I came to this conclusion here, though Kanagraja claimed that it is the rising genre in ELT research. So it's the it's actually the well-practiced genre, because I found that there are many research studies done in this area. And the blooming growth of undertaking autoethnography is seen since 2015, because out of 30, 21 of my research studies are towards that towards those years. And then before 2015, 9 research studies had been done, but I'm talking here about only my research studies. There might have been other studies as well, but yeah, out of these 30 studies, I categorized in this way. So autoethnography in ELT research comprises different research trends, and it comprises the multidimensional aspects of ELT-related concerns in the research arena. And in the last 10 years, autoethnography in ELT research has given much space for identity construction of English teachers and teacher educators. This is what my research actually found. So this is all what I have brought for today's presentation. Thank you, everyone.